Flight Director Mike Serafin has been told by his propulsion officer that we have completed the activation of the reaction control system thrusters on Orion. This crew module propulsion system for the maiden flight of Orion, consisting of 2 strings of 6 monopropellant hydrazine reaction control system thrusters that are located in 8 thruster pods, 2 pitch-down pods, 2 pitch-up pods, 2 pods that control the roll of the spacecraft, and 2 that control the yaw of the spacecraft. So the thrusters are up and running, in good shape, ready to support the controllability of Orion as it makes its way through the Earth's atmosphere. It will begin to enter the Earth's atmosphere at an altitude of about 400,000 feet above the Earth at the 4-hour, 14-minute mark into the mission. And at that point, we are expecting about a 10-minute transit in which Orion will initiate that entry into the atmosphere at a speed of about 20,000 miles an hour, some 84% of the velocity that will be experienced by Orion when it returns from a SEAS lunar mission several years from now. In just 10 minutes, its series of parachutes will slow Orion down from that breathtaking speed of 20,000 miles an hour to a gentler speed of about 20 miles an hour as it hits the water under its 3 main parachutes. As we approach peak altitude, we're currently 3,200 statute miles above the Earth. There is another fabulous view of our planet from one of the flight test cameras in the crew module of the spacecraft. Orion is currently orbiting at that altitude, about to begin a southwest to northeasterly track that will carry it across the west coast of Australia a short time from now. Just to recap several times upcoming for key events. Once again, we are expecting Orion to reach its peak altitude just a few minutes from now at 9:05 a.m. Central Time. We'll receive a final update on splashdown targeting by the flight dynamics officer. The latitude and longitude of the expected splashdown point for the vehicle will be inhibiting the attitude control system as the second stage of the Delta IV rocket goes into free drift in preparation for the separation of the crew module from the service module. That's expected 38 minutes from now at about 9:28 a.m. Central Time. The flight director here, Mike Serafin, will be assessing Orion systems before he gives a go-no-go decision for extended power-up of the spacecraft after it splashes down in the Pacific. That will be of value for Lockheed Martin as it evaluates the thermal effects of Orion's high-speed return back to Earth. The nominal power-down scenario would call for a power-down and a handover from this flight control team to the NASA Navy recovery forces out in the Pacific. That normally would occur about 15 minutes after splashdown, but the latest plan, if Orion systems can support it, would call for that power down to occur about an hour after splashdown, at which point the flight control team here in Houston would hand over to the recovery team out in the Pacific, and the job by this team of flight controllers will be done for the day. Entry interface back into the Earth's atmosphere is currently targeted for about 10:16 a.m. Central Time. That will occur at a point at which Orion will be 400,000 feet above the Earth's atmosphere, traveling at 19,000 miles an hour with about 831 miles to go before it reaches its splashdown site. Peak heating on the vehicle to about 4,000 degrees Fahrenheit is expected about a minute and a half after entry interface at an altitude of some 32.5 miles above the Earth, while Orion is traveling more than 17,000 miles an hour. And again, this is a dramatic return to Earth for this spacecraft, exercising all of its systems on its maiden flight, its shakedown cruise, if you will, as Orion moves from a point above the Earth, traveling at 20,000 miles an hour to a speed of just 20 miles an hour at the time of splashdown under its three main parachutes. We are 2 hours 48 minutes into the flight of Orion on its maiden mission, 1 hour 36 minutes to go before its splashdown in the Pacific. Orion now continuing to climb to its peak altitude, approaching the 3,400-mile mark in statute miles above the Earth, guided to that altitude by the two burns of the upper stage of the Delta IV rocket. Again, Orion having launched at 6:05 a.m. Central Time, 7:05 a.m. Eastern Time, right on the money at the opening of the window on this second launch attempt for the vehicle. That was 2 hours and 50 minutes ago. The first burn of the upper stage was about 11 minutes and 35 seconds in duration. That brought Orion to its initial elliptical orbit above the Earth for its first lap around the planet. And once it came around at about the 1 hour 55 minute mark into the mission, a 4.5 minute burn, a second firing of the upper stage of the Delta IV rocket propelled Orion away from low Earth orbit on route to peak altitude, which it will reach just a few minutes from now. We're expecting to arrive at peak altitude about 10 minutes from now. Currently, Orion passing the 3,400-mile mark in altitude. This is Mission Control Houston, continuing to watch the progress of Orion as it climbs toward peak altitude, now approaching 3,500 miles in altitude, statute miles, that is, courtesy of the upper stage of the Delta IV rocket, which has performed to perfection in guiding Orion. This is Mission Control Houston here in the flight control room. The flight dynamics officer, Mark McDonald, has just reported back to Flight Director Mike Serafin that all of the data having been received from the guidance and GPS systems on board Orion have now been processed through the guidance console and his console. We are predicting a maximum G load on the Orion spacecraft of 8.2 Gs. That is well within the family expected for this maiden flight. The predicted splashdown point is just 1.3 nautical miles east of the predicted pre-flight target, which is almost a bullseye splashdown, and the predicted splashdown point is currently estimated at 23.61 degrees north latitude, 116.46 degrees west longitude. That will constitute what we had expected, about 600 miles or so to the west of Baja California, where the USS Anchorage and the U.S. naval ship Salvor are in the zone. They are prepared to work in concert with teams of helicopters, the Icana unpiloted airborne vehicle to provide all of the landing support. This is a live view from the Icana that is arriving at the splashdown zone west of Baja California. So again, the information being provided by the flight dynamics officer indicates an almost bullseye splashdown predicted for Orion, just 1.3 nautical miles east of its predicted pre-flight target. And again, the coordinates expected for splashdown, 23.61 degrees north latitude, 116.46 degrees west longitude, some 600 statute miles west of Baja California. We are now just a few miles away from reaching peak altitude. Again, this dramatic view of the limb of the Earth from one of the flight test cameras in the crew module of Orion. Orion currently flying from southwest to northeast in an orbit inclined 28.45 degrees to either side of the equator, approaching a point just off the northwestern coast of Australia. Again, all of Orion's systems are operating to perfection so far, as we are now just 26 minutes away from separating the crew module from the service module and beginning all of the critical events that will lead up to Orion's high-speed entry back into the Earth's atmosphere and its splashdown in the Pacific Ocean. This is Mission Control Houston. Orion is now approaching its peak altitude. Currently having passed 3,600 statute miles in altitude. The spacecraft is flying west of the continent of Australia, moving from southwest to northeast. The guidance officer reports that Orion's GPS system is functioning so well. It is exceeding pre-flight predictions in processing data at the altitude that it is currently flying at. We are 3 hours, 5 minutes into the maiden flight of Orion, with 1 hour, 19 minutes to go before predicted splashdown in the Pacific. This is Mission Control Houston. The Flight Dynamics Officer, Mark McDonald, reports that Orion reached its peak altitude at 9:11 a.m. Central Time, just about 1 minute ago, at a mission elapsed time of 3 hours and 6 minutes into the flight. Peak altitude was calculated by Orion's navigation systems to be 3,604.2 statute miles. That's the equivalent of 3,132 nautical miles. So Orion is now heading downhill, if you will, on the trek back to Earth and a splashdown in the Pacific Ocean 1 hour 17 minutes from now. Again, peak altitude reached at 9:11 a.m. Central Time. That peak altitude calculated by the Flight Dynamics Officer to be 3,604.2 statute miles, or 3,132 nautical miles. As we reported a few minutes ago, earlier, just about 5 minutes or so ago, about 10 minutes ago, the Flight Dynamics Officer reported that the onboard systems aboard Orion has processed a predicted G-force to be built up on the spacecraft. If you were a crew member sitting inside the crew module, you would be experiencing a pull of 8.2 Gs. That's, just to put that in perspective, a crew that returns from Earth in a Soyuz spacecraft from the International Space Station pulls about 4.5 Gs as it enters into the Earth's atmosphere. So Orion will be pulling about 8.2 Gs during the course of its high-speed reentry back to Earth. Its predicted splashdown target is just 1.3 nautical miles, or 1.5 statute miles, east of its pre-flight predicted target. That's almost a bullseye splashdown expected for Orion. And the coordinates of the predicted splashdown site, 23.61 degrees north latitude, 116.46 degrees west longitude, some 600 statute miles west of Baja California. The Spaceflight Meteorology Group here at the Johnson Space Center has maintained its forecast throughout the morning of winds out of 0 degrees at about 12 knots at the splashdown site and wave heights of about 4.5 feet. Those wave heights have picked up ever so slightly since the beginning of the mission just over 3 hours ago, but certainly well within constraints for a safe and efficient recovery of Orion once it's on the water. This is Mission Control Houston. The next critical milestone for Orion is coming up in just 10 minutes, the separation of the crew module from the service module. We're expecting the upper stage of the Delta IV to maneuver the vehicle into the correct separation orientation. Once Orion separates, It will maneuver 180 degrees through the use of its thrusters to place its heat shield forward for the start of its high-speed return back into the Earth's atmosphere. Entry interface is just under an hour from now, and that's where the rubber meets the road, if you will, with the testing of Orion's heat shield to repel temperatures that will build upon Orion up to about 4,000 degrees Fahrenheit, and that all in preparation for the rapid-fire succession of a series of 11 parachutes that will pull the forward bay cover at the top of the spacecraft off, and then enable the drogue chutes and then the main parachutes to deploy in sequential fashion. And just in terms of geography, just a minor correction to what I had been indicating earlier. The splashdown target for Orion would put it about 275 miles west of Baja, about 630 miles southwest of San Diego. That's the port at the naval base there to which Orion will be returned to as it is towed back into port over the next few days by the USS Anchorage once it's secured in the well deck of the Anchorage. So the splashdown target for Orion, depending on how you look at it geographically, is going to be about 275 miles west of Baja, about 630 miles southwest of San Diego. To recap all of the events of the day, it has been an historic day as America takes its next step in space exploration with the launch of Orion atop the Delta IV Heavy rocket occurring on time at 6:05 a.m. Central Time, 7:05 a.m. Eastern Time from Launch Complex 37 at the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station in Florida. Some 6 minutes and change after launch, the first two critical Orion program milestones were achieved with the jettisoning of the three large fairing panels surrounding the service module mass simulator article atop which the Orion spacecraft is mounted. That was followed just moments later by the jettisoning of the launch abort system that completed again the first two major programmatic milestones. The upper stage of the Delta IV rocket fired twice, first for 11.5 minutes to place Orion in its first elliptical orbit of the Earth, followed by a second firing at the 1 hour 55-minute mark into the flight. That was a 4-minute 35-second burn that broke Orion out of low Earth orbit and sent it through the Van Allen radiation belt for the first of two such transits through the radiation belt. The second one is coming up. Orion reached its peak altitude at 9:11 a.m. Central Time of 3,604.2 statute miles above the Earth, the farthest any human-occupied or human-rated spacecraft has been in 42 years since the flight of Apollo 17, the final human mission to the moon. We are now standing by for the separation of the crew module from the service module less than 5.5 minutes from now. Atop the upper stage of the Delta IV rocket, Orion is in the proper orientation for its pyrotechnic separation from the service module mass simulator. Standing by for that major milestone 3 minutes and 45 seconds from now. The upper stage of the Delta IV has been placed in what is called free drift. Its thrusters commanded to being disabled temporarily to prevent any inadvertent perturbations on Orion at the time of crew module separation. Once the Orion is free, flying on its own for the first time, the Delta IV's attitude control system will be re-enabled. The second stage goes back into its own attitude control in order to provide the correct orientation for its firing for a third time of its engine to dispose it into the Pacific Ocean, well away from Orion's splashdown point. Coming up on the 2-minute mark until Orion flies free for the first time. After reaching a peak altitude of 3,604.2 statute miles above the Earth, Orion is now 3,315 miles in altitude, statute miles. 1 minute, 20 seconds until Orion separates from the upper stage of the Delta IV. Inside 30 seconds now until crew module separation. Crew module separation is now confirmed at 9:28 a.m. Central Time. Orion flies free for the first time in its history at a mission elapsed time of 3 hours 24 minutes into its maiden flight. Orion currently processing excellent guidance commands through its onboard system, its thrusters providing perfect control. We have a very stable spacecraft, now at an altitude of 3,200 statute miles above the Earth. Time to splash down 59 minutes. As we take this major milestone of the next step in human space exploration for the United States of America on board the International Space Station, the Expedition 42 crew has been watching activities throughout the course of the morning with great interest, led by Commander Butch Wilmore. Here is a still picture of the crew from left to right: Alexander Samokhutyaev, Anton Shkaplerov, Samantha Cristoforetti of the European Space Agency, and Butch Wilmore watching the launch of the Delta IV rocket that took place at 6:05 a.m. Central Time, 7:05 a.m. Eastern Time. The crew has been following all of the activities at yesterday's scrub and all of the activities throughout the course of the day today in this maiden flight of Orion with great interest as they are using the International Space Station, of course, as a test bed, as a platform for technology development and demonstration for all of the hardware that will be vital for a trip to Mars in the not-too-distant future. So to recap, Orion is flying free for the first time in its history, having separated just a few moments ago from the upper stage of the Delta IV rocket and the service module that served it so well throughout the course of the day today. Launch occurring 3 hours 26 minutes ago, and we are now just 57 minutes away from splashdown in the Pacific Ocean. We are expecting an on-target, almost a bullseye splashdown for Orion. We'll be back with all of that a short time from now, but at this moment, let's go back to where it all began this morning at the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station in Florida, and Brandy Dean at Hangar AE. Brandy?
Thanks, Rob. Back here now in the Mission Director Center at Hangar AE in Cape Canaveral Air Force Station. And the mission management team's continuing to watch. A few minutes ago, there was applause in the room when the service module separated from the crew module and left the crew module to fly alone and make its return home. Coming up now on that, as Rob said, splashdown in less than an hour now, and that means that we're coming up on what's really the trial by fire that we've been looking forward to, the test of the heat shield, so that we can make sure it can handle the heat when we are coming back from deep space destinations. The farther you go, the faster you come back, and so the more heat that's generated on the heat shield, and so we want to make sure that it is going to be up to the task of returning astronauts safely to Earth when they are on board. The heat shield on Orion is 16.5 feet wide, the largest of its kind ever built, and it was built around a titanium skeleton with a carbon fiber skin that gives the heat shield its shape and also supports the loads at landing. It will still be going about 20 miles per hour when it finally splashes down under its parachutes today. The skin and skeleton are covered in a fiberglass honeycomb structure that fits over the skin. That honeycomb has about 320,000 cells, each of which was individually filled with material called Avcoat. Avcoat's an ablative material, and that means that instead of transferring the heat, it's going to be burning away. That means that the heat won't be transferred back into Orion itself as that material burns away, and that'll keep things inside from getting too hot. But at its thickest point, the heat shield's only about 1.6 inches thick, and 20% of that will burn away as Orion passes through the extreme heat of entry interface that's coming up. During that time, the heat shield will reach temperatures near 4,000 degrees Fahrenheit, which is about twice as hot as molten lava, so nothing to laugh about. But that is only 80% of what the heat shield will have to withstand when it's coming back from the vicinity of the moon. Again, the farther you go, the faster you come back, and the hotter it gets during re-entry. But 80% is enough to give us a good checkout. That rocket, Delta IV Heavy rocket that took us into space today, is the largest one currently available, and it's high enough to get us to the distance we went. But to go any further, we'll need the Space Launch System, which should be coming up soon. It'll be the most powerful rocket ever built and be able to get us into those deep space destinations that give us the really fast re-entry and high temperatures. We spoke to Orion aerothermodynamics engineer Molly White at Johnson Space Center recently to get some more information on the heat shield. And we're going to take a look at that next here on NASA television.
Hi, my name is Molly White, and I'm a heat shield engineer for Orion. The The Orion spacecraft is designed to go further than humans ever have before. And the further out you go, the faster you come back. And the faster you come back, the hotter you get. So Orion needs a really, really good heat shield to protect its crew from that really, really hot air that's going to be around it when it comes back. Why Orion needs a heat shield? If we think about friction, and I'm moving my hands past each other, just moving them pretty slowly, I can still feel heat build up between my hands. It gets hotter. Well, if we think about Orion, which is going 25 to 30 times the speed of sound, it has that same friction with the air, only it's going way faster than my hands can. So there's a lot of heat that is around Orion that it needs to be protected from. The heat shield for Orion, it's 16.5 feet in diameter. It's the largest, most innovative heat shield of its kind. The heat shield weighs about 1,000 pounds. The total vehicle mass is about 20,000 pounds. So it's about 1/20th the weight of Orion just for the heat shield itself. So Orion, for its first flight test, will see surface temperatures at around 4,000 degrees Fahrenheit. So we've developed new materials for Orion that can withstand those higher temperatures. The material for Orion is actually designed to withstand up to 6,000 degrees Fahrenheit. My favorite part of working on Orion is just the fantastic group of really, really smart people that I get to work with every day. They're excited and passionate, as I am, about taking humans further than we ever have before, bringing back all the technology and everything that we've developed out there back here to Earth just to improve our lives. And that's the thing that I get most excited about when coming to work.
Although the heat shield will see the highest temperatures during re-entry, the rest of the vehicle doesn't get a break. The sides of Orion, which you can see here represented in this graphic, are covered with 970 tiles that make up Orion's back shell. These tiles are almost identical to those that protected the belly of the space shuttles as they were re-entering from their trips around the Earth. But the temperatures on the side of Orion will get up to 3,150 degrees Fahrenheit. Also, to better understand how Orion would fare if one of those tiles was damaged by micrometeoroid orbital debris in space, two small holes have been drilled into two of the tiles on Orion's back shell. Each one is 1 inch and 1 inch wide and 1 inch deep. One is 1 inch deep, and the second is 1.4 inches deep. And the data that the engineers collect from having those two holes in the tiles will allow them to verify that the models that show how Orion will fare as it's coming home from deep space are valid. Even after Orion's heat shield does its job and the spacecraft comes out unscathed on the other side of the extreme re-entry temperatures, there's still a lot of tests left to do before Orion wraps up its day. And it's all going to be packed into just a few minutes. The last 5 minutes before splashdown are all parachutes. Orion has 11 in all that it uses to slow down from about 300 miles per hour after it comes out the other side of the Earth's atmosphere and goes down to less than 20 miles per hour for a safe landing. Parachute systems basically assemble themselves in flight as Orion is falling toward the ocean, and it has to work in order to keep astronauts safe when they return home. We spoke with Tara Radke, who's the Orion Integrated Landing Systems Manager, about the parachutes recently at Johnson Space Center. We're going to take a look at that now.
My name is Tara Radke, and I'm the System Manager for Orion Integrated Landing Systems. So, even though Orion has performed the majority of its mission of taking humans to space and then returning back home, we still have to do the last really important part, slowing down so that they can safely land and be recovered onto the ship and back home. Orion's coming back from deep space and re-enters the atmosphere, going really fast. The guidance navigation control system does some maneuvering to help slow down the vehicle, and at that point, start looking for the right conditions to deploy the parachutes. The first parachutes that come out are the 4 bay cover parachutes. They're mortar deployed, so they're fired basically with cannons out the back of the vehicle at 125 feet per second. After those are inflated, pyrotechnic piston thrusters push the cover off and jettison it away, and that exposes all the other parachutes that are on the top of the vehicle so they can perform their job. The next parachutes in the sequence are the drogue parachutes. The drogue parachutes, again, are also mortar fired. out into the clean air so that they can properly deploy. And they actually open in stages, so they slowly open up so that they don't have a hard force on the vehicle or on the parachutes themselves and damage them. At that point, we actually cut the drogue parachutes so that those parachutes are able to leave, and the next parachutes, the pilot parachutes, are able to deploy at that point. The pilot parachutes are small chutes. They're actually 11 feet in diameter and are actually used to pull the main parachutes out of the bay. The main parachutes are the large ones. Those are 300 pounds, and when they are fully inflated, 116 feet in diameter. The main parachutes do the majority of the job of slowing down the vehicle. All three main parachutes deploy. They also open in stages to protect the structure and the parachutes and the crew on board. And at that point, slow the vehicle down to about 25 feet per second when it lands in the water. Working in the descent and landing phase is really challenging. You're coming from extreme environments that you've had to go along on the ride the entire way. As we work with the parachutes, as we work with the GNC team and how all these pieces fit together, it feels like a very important job to make sure that we're taking care of the crew, that we're bringing them back safely, and that we land and keep the vehicle safe around them and are able to recover them safely.
So just less than an hour now to go until Orion is ready to splash down in the Pacific Ocean, wrapping up today's trial by fire. Orion's made it through many of its, or all of its milestones so far successfully, but of course it still has several to go with the parachutes and the re-entry left to come in today's flight. We hope to have video from Orion for much of its return, including possibly a look at the parachutes from above Orion through its windows as it's coming down for its splashdown in the Pacific Ocean. And as it makes its way to the Pacific Ocean for splashdown, we're also hoping to get a good view of it under the parachutes from a distance as well. That'll be coming from the Icona unmanned aerial vehicle that we saw some great video from earlier. It'll be arriving at the splashdown zone and getting in place to look at the area that Orion is scheduled to splash down in. Again, that's called the Icona, and it's an interesting vehicle in its own right, so we're going to take a closer look at it now.
On launch day, before the actual launch of the Orion takes place in Florida, the Icona will take off from NASA Armstrong Flight Research Center and head out to the Pacific to acquire the Orion capsule on re-entry and look at the parachutes as they come out. So we'll be at an altitude that when the Orion capsule is coming in, it'll be coming towards us as it's going down.
865, how's this climb rate working for you?
We're going to use the infrared camera to acquire the vehicle as it's coming down and eventually change to the optical camera to give better situational awareness of what's going on splashdown. Icona is a Native American Choctaw word that means conscious, self-aware, intelligent. And the reason we chose that name for the airplane is that we were interested in doing research in autonomous control in ways that the airplane could assist the pilot in avoiding collisions or avoiding traffic and being able to respond to its own environment in a safe way. The agency has used the Icona UAS in several different ways. Icona supported the Western States Fire mission. The goal there was to provide situational awareness to the firefighters in the middle of fighting a fire and do it in almost real-time manner, something they had not been able to have from the air in the same way.
Okay, we're leveling off at 12,000. Our first tense point is going to have us around 80 knots.
We've also flown fiber optic technology on the airplane to measure the wing bending on the airplane.
Push over, pull up. Roger.
With the fiber, they could measure like hundreds of times more of what the wing was doing. So if you want to have the feedback to what you want the wing to do, either by bending the wing or bending other surfaces, you have way more feedback by doing it this way.
Oakland Center for Hawk 2-1. It looks like I'll be overtaking traffic. My nose for about 3 miles. I'd like to deviate right
Right now, we're getting ready to fly the airplane with a research flight control system that will allow an eventual autonomous capability of the airplane, primarily for self-separation. Our goal is to improve the safety of UAS flying in the national airspace, and if we can help the pilots on the ground controlling the remotely piloted airplanes know where the traffic around them is and give them standard ways to separate from that traffic, this would be a great way to do that.
Oakland Center, I got a traffic advisory saying that I have 02 Sierra overtaking. I'd like to deviate right for traffic.
Hawk 2-1 approved as requested.
That it was a closer look at the Icona unmanned aerial vehicle that's going to be hopefully providing us some views of Orion as it splashes down under its massive 3 main parachutes. As I said, it's getting into place for that now, and once it does pick up Orion, it'll be starting with an infrared view to capture its heat signature, and then changing to the color camera view that we saw earlier as the sun was rising over the Pacific Ocean. About 45 minutes now until splashdown. The crew module separated from the rest of the vehicle, making its way back towards the Earth's atmosphere, while the service module and the Delta IV Heavy upper stage are left to make their own way home. Coming up in about 4 minutes, the Delta will be doing an engine firing that will set it on its way back through Earth's atmosphere as well for a controlled deorbit north of Hawaii.